So film looks are extremely popular nowadays, and if you are within the color grading community, you've probably heard about Kodak 2383. Now this is a film print stock that is extremely popular due to its cinematic look. Because we are working with digital, we want to create it and emulate it. And luckily for DaVinci Resolve, we have the ability to do so because of the amount of control that we have within color grading. So today I'm going to show you how to create something similar to this, and simultaneously I'm also going to show you a different alternative in case you don't have some of the paid assets such as DCTLs or Dehancer. And we're going to actually create a new color grading version. And while I go through everything, one thing I do want to say is your node tree does not have to be exactly like mine. You can do many different things to emulate a film print. And again, because color grading, you have a lot of freedom to create your own style. At the end of the day, have fun with it. That's the most important thing. So first off, red to DWG, this is going to convert the camera's information to DaVinci wide gamut. And because we're also working in that color space, everything that I'm going to do following with that in terms of contrast in my middle gray is going to follow the rules of DaVinci wide gamut because this is a much wider color space to grade in. So first things first, let's look at the information, and we already have that the input color space for red is wide gamut RGB and the input gamma is red log 3 G10. Again, like I told you, we're working in DaVinci wide gamut alongside with the output gamma of DaVinci intermediate. And coming over to the DaVinci wide gamut to Rec 709, and I am going to input that information that I had prior. So let's do Rec 709, and if you're going to submit this for broadcast, you're actually going to put this as gamma 2.4, for web gamma 2.2. In this situation, because I am working on a Mac, I'm just going to leave it at Rec 709-A. So the first thing I like to do when I come to grade is I like to mess around with my exposure and my contrast. First thing I will do in this situation is I'm going to adjust for my contrast, and I'm going to have my middle gray stay locked at 18%. And if you're trying to stay at middle gray, what you can do is come over to your contrast node, come to your pivot at 0.336, and then everything that you affect within your contrast going to stay locked in at the middle gray values. But there's another free DCTL that a YouTuber, which I will link his name, that has a nice little DCTL that you're able to check where the middle gray point is, and you can lock that on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to my effects, and I am going to drag that DCTL onto contrast actually, and then I'm going to go to exposure chart. So the next thing you do is you create another node, you come over to your color picker, and then you will do the qualifier, come over to the curves, let's put that right on the custom, and then this is where middle gray is going to be. And his best advice was to use editable splines to make sure that you're not messing around with the middle gray point. So now I could come back over this contrast node and I actually can disable that. And then on top of that, what I'm actually gonna do is keep this pivot at 0.336. If you don't have that DCTL, you can do that from there. And that only works if you're working in DaVinci wide gamut's color space. Obviously, you have the free ability to do your curves however you like to, but in the correct sense, this is probably the best way to follow. So in terms of middle gray, what we're gonna do is we're going to come right back over here, and I'm going to select on these points, and I'm going to make a nice little S curve. And in fact, we're not going to actually we're going to actually keep all the RGB values. In reality, if I just select the Y, we're just messing around with the luminance instead of also saturating the reds, the greens, and the blues alongside when we are adding contrast. But in this situation, I'm going to affect everything, so I'm cool with that. So a nice little S curve, something small, and I can even increase this maybe just a little bit about this point. So coming over to my exposure, this is where I'll start to mess around with my image. If I want to bring maybe some of the shadows up just a little bit, and then let's drop down some of the gamma. I want those midtones to come in and maybe even soften some of the highlights. And then I also have the ability to drop the highlights this way as well. Next thing I'll want to do is I'll come over to my primaries. I want to kind of give this that look that we had initially. So I kind of followed the idea of adding more greens and blues within the shadows, mixing that in with my midtones, and then trying to maintain my skin tones alongside with all of that. I am going to decrease some of the blues. I'm gonna decrease some of the reds, kind of make it a little bit green, decrease the red within the midtones, and then maybe increase my blues for my midtones. And then to bring that back with the skin, you can do two separate things. Now, in reality, I'm using a parallel node mixer because I want to blend my adjustments. I don't want them to stack. If I wanted to isolate the skin separately, I could either one, create a serial node so that way I could use the HSL qualifier to my advantage, or I can come over to the HSL qualifier while blending, and I am going to isolate my subject's skin, right? What I'm also going to do is select Shift H so I can see exactly what is being affected. Or if you don't want to hit Shift H, you can come right over here and you can see exactly exactly what's being highlighted. And now I'm going to try and isolate her skin tones as best as possible. So I'm going to refine that with the hues, and I'm going to also soften it as much as I can. And then same thing with the saturation. Oop, that's a little too much. I'm trying to get her skin only as much as I possibly can. It's okay if I get a little bit of other stuff in there, but for the most part, I want to make sure that I'm only getting her skin tones. So once I've messed around with those parameters as much as I can, I come right over to the matte finesse. We're going to mess around and clean with those blacks, and we're also going to clean those whites. We're going to blur the radius to soften everything that's going around, and even the in and outs. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come right over here. I'm also going to pay attention a little to my vector scope. I'm going to warm that skin tone right back up. And you can already see how I'm shaping her skin to come back, right? So what this did before, we had greens. Now we're bringing back in that skin color because that's what we want to do. We don't want her to look green. So the primaries are there. So that way I'm formulating the entire image, but now we're using the HSL to create those secondary adjustments. And we can kind of see how under the skin, there's still a little bit of green going on here. So what I might even do is I'll come back over and let's shift H and try and include that even more. Now it's looking much better than it was before. And with the HDR wheels, I'll be able to create different adjustments that can emulate in-camera presence. So if I wanted to drop the shadows by a quarter of a stop, I could come over here and drop those shadows. And then if I wanted to bring back in the light, see what's being affected, I could bring this back up even another quarter of a stop. You can kind of see what it does, right? So in this situation, I'm actually going to bring the light right back down because I think so far she looks pretty balanced. So coming right over to the HSV and the HSL nodes, shout out to my boy Jonathan for also teaching me more about the HSL. HSV is going to add in the cinematic saturation, but the one thing that it does is it doesn't take in the filmic density, right? HSL actually works in the opposite way. So when you're desaturating, it's going to add filmic density. So in tandem, what I'm doing here is I'm going to blend the two so that way they work together. And again, you can also do this as a serial node, but you have the freedom to do this however you like. So what I'll do is for the HSV node, we're just going to come over to color space. We're going to select HSV, and I am going to disable channel 1 and channel 3. And then for the HSL, we're going to come right back over to color space, HSL, and we are also going to copy the same thing, channel 3, and disable channel 1. Now, if I go back over to the HSV node and I come back over to my primaries and I use the gain tool, I can start to increase that saturation or decrease that saturation. And now we're adding a little bit more color. And then if I come back over to the HSL, I can also kind of blend it a little bit more as well. So it's interesting how these nodes will work in tandem with one another. And on top of that, you also have the ability to mess with the gamma to also increase those desaturated portions. So now coming over to the density, there are many different ways that you can add filmic density as well. One way is actually still with the color slice tool. So what I'll actually do is I end up dropping the density, or I'll increase it a little bit more, but then I also utilize the depth that it is occurring at. It makes small adjustments. Like, it's very, very hard to see, but it's like small adjustments that I'm also messing around. So I will drop that density right about there. Kind of looks good to me. And then after that, let's come over to the next node. Now, these next couple of nodes utilize DCTLs, which stands for DaVinci Color Transformation Language. It uses scripts that users have created to kind of communicate with DaVinci to allow you to refine your adjustments and kind of tone in your color grading with much more complex code that will allow you to rewrite the pixel data that is already given. So there are a couple of different DCTLs that will allow you to refine your saturation, your hues, and so many more different things. But before I get over to these DCTLs, some which are free and some which are paid, I want to show you exactly now what we can do to finalize our look, right? So essentially what we can do is we can come over here and we can now shut this node off, right? Because if we're wanting to use the film print, essentially what we're going to do is we're going to come back and create a CST. And that CST is going to input the color space of DaVinci Wide Gamut and the input of DaVinci Intermediate. And we're going to output our gamma as Cineon Film Log. And with Cineon Film Log, we're going to use that Kodak 2383 film print stock. And because it's a film look that DaVinci offers, you're just going to come over here, come over to the LUTs, and then select the film look. And I've already selected it for Rec 709, and we're going to use the D55. So when I enable that, now it's already transformed my image, right? And simultaneously too, what I can now do is I can come back back, and if I want to mess around with some of the information that I had prior, such as, okay, now I want to bring back that light down like half a stop to balance her face, then I have the ability to now balance that image. That is what you can do with the free version. Alongside with that, now if I want to add some grain, I can then add the grain, and I can come over, type in the film grain within the effects, and then I can mess around and get that final image, and boom, looking good so far. And once I'm done with that film grain, I can probably say, okay, this looks so far so good. And if I want to fine tune some of her skin tones, then I would come back over the skin, and we're gonna actually mess around with those color wheels just like I showed you before, isolate and see exactly what's working. But so far her skin is kind of like on the skin tone line. But now that we're done and I've shown you what to do from there, we're actually gonna re-disable all those nodes, come back to DaVinci wide gamut. We are going to use some of these DCTLs to finish up our image. So desatch tool, this is another DCTL that you can actually get for free, and it's also going to mess around with the filmic density and allow us to desaturate the different hue values. In this situation, I'm just going to actually drop the reds maybe a little bit, and then I'm also going to desaturate the greens, right? And then coming right over to Tetra, I'm going to add on that other DCTL. This one is also free. And by the way, I will have these DCTLs linked, and you can get all this information free on my Patreon. It is free to subscribe to. So we're just going to come over and we're just going to go to Tetra. I'm actually going to increase the greens, not too much, just a little bit, and then maybe mess around with the blues. All right, cool. And then we also have another free DCTL. We're going to add some Filmic Contrast, and this does exactly just what I said. We've already added contrast with our middle gray point, but I can come right over here and mess around and add or decrease it just a little bit more. So I'm going to decrease it just a little bit. Now the fun part of utilizing Dehancer. So Dehancer is a film OFX plugin that you can actually purchase. If you use the code GL Creative, you can actually get 10% off of Dehancer. But Dehancer is really cool because you can pretty much do all your film stocks, your film prints, so many different tools that you can utilize within Dehancer to create some really cool film looks. This is going to be my icing on the cake where I finish this grade. So we're going to disable all the tools right here, and then we are going to come back, and I'm going to put the source as DaVinci wide gamut / intermediate because that's exactly the color space we were working on. And the film print, I'm actually going to use Kodak Gold 200. I kind of really do like the look of that, and I'm going to actually enable that. And I have the ability to mess around and push and pull those exposure values. That's what the EV stands for, but we're going to kind of keep it smack dab in the middle. And for the print, we're going to use the Kodak 2383 print film, and I'm going to enable that, and we're already going to see that there is much more contrast going on. So I can also dive and drop that tonal contrast as needed. We're going to add a little more color density back into the image. Again, you have the ability to go through these different nodes, and I haven't made a full review. That review is coming. And then nice little grain, enable that grain on there. I really like the grain that it gives you. It's very subtle, but like I look at this and I'm like, man, this is gorgeous. I also will do the bloom in here. I really do love the bloom that they come with, and there are many different presets for you to pick from. We'll amplify that bloom as needed to bring some glow to her face. And after that, I don't really want to use anything of the overscan, but I'll show you. If you do add the overscan, we can kind of go for that stylistic look. And simultaneously too, I have the ability to change that gate type. I really do like the horizontal one. It's so sick. After that, I would say voila, we have our film look. And just like that, we started with this and we ended up getting all the way over here. And that's essentially how you can use the Kodak 2383 to create a film look. So now you have the ability to utilize the tools that DaVinci gives you. And if you don't want to pay for some of the OFX plugins such as Dehancer to enhance that image, you have the ability to do so as well. It's really cool what you can do with film looks and different types of film prints and just the whole entire world of film emulation. If you guys like these type of videos, please head over to my Patreon. It's completely free to join. It definitely helps support, and it allows me to crank out some cool content for you guys and give you great resources to use when you're color grading and editing. And if you're already not, head over to Instagram and TikTok if you love short form content, where you can also get tutorials and much more information about grading and so many other different things on my pages. All right, that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you on the next one. Take it easy.